Hey, my name is Gilbert and welcome to our Games and Tech. By the end of this tutorial, you'll be able to provide multiple keyboard layouts so that people can play your game choosing some of the most common ones. Okay, so by the end of this tutorial, you guys should be able to have something like this demo. So it's just a character that you can move around, like so. And as you can see, if I hold the key, it's going to repeat a bunch of times here. It's going to say the key times the amount of times that you've pressed it. So in this demo, we have a character that can move, with the WASD keys, right? That's one of the profiles that we have created and that we're going to be creating. And, with the mouse wheel, we're going to be able to go to the next one in case we don't like that one. In this case, we have the arrow keys. As you can see, I'm pressing the WASD keys and nothing happens. But if I go ahead and press the arrow keys, we move around just fine, like so. Fairly neat. Now, if we go one step further, then we're going to see that we have another profile. And now, now what works is ES, right? We have ESDF. And this is what we're moving around with. And the last profile is going to be one that I don't think anybody's going to set up, but we're just going to have it there just in case. And that's going to be the IJKL profile. And we're able to actually move with that, with those keys just fine. So this is the goal. In case you want to go back to the original one, then we can just wrap around it and use what we're used to, the WASD keys. And that's pretty much it. I hope this is what you're looking for, and yeah, let's get on. So the first thing we have to do is have a project. In this case, I went ahead and I already had a template project. Now, you can definitely apply this to an existing project you have. You do have to keep in mind that the way you have your control set up might be very different from what I'm going to show you. So if you're willing to go ahead and change that much in your code, then you should be more than fine. You just have to have a project already working. In this case, I have my objects here. So I have a solid object, a player, whatever, right? In this case, my player object has nothing in it. So I just have to set out some of the sprites that I have for him, and that's it. So that's the player. Okay, so now we're gonna go into the room and we're gonna make sure the first thing we have is actually a player and some objects to move around. So we should be pretty good to go. After that, we don't have to see the room anymore for now. So now we have a player object. Now the next thing that we want to do is we want to create a script. So the script is going to hold all of our logic. Now this function we're going to rename to create profile. And then we're going to make this a constructor. We're going to say constructor right here. And when in front of a function, you put the word constructor. That means that you're creating a template. A template that we can use to create more instances of this struct. So if you don't know what structs are, Yo-Yo Games have a very good definition of what a struct is on their manual. And it says, a struct is a variable that holds a collection of other variables. The variables that a struct holds can be of any data type. And these variables can be read from and written to after the initial struct declaration. And you can also add more variables to a struct after it has been declared. So you basically have a variable that can hold all the variables, right, with different data type, which is very useful. And you're going to see why in a few seconds. What is it that we're going to be doing here? First, we're going to have an array that's going to store all of the inputs that we pass to this struct when we first create it. So we can say inputs array, and then we can do something like this. So we're going to say left, right, up, down, and we're going to say, I don't know, pause. These are the values that we're going to pass on here. And up here is where we're going to declare these variables that we're going to pass into the struct when we first initialize it. In this case, when we first create it. Right? Now, the initial value of these variables can be something that we don't have to assign when we first declare them, right? So what's going to end up happening is if you just declare this struct somewhere else, right? So if let's say you want to create a copy and you say my default profile, like so, right? And you say new create profile, and we do something like this, and we don't pass any values. Now create profile is gonna have this array, right, that we declared in here with all of these values as their initial value. Since we didn't give it anything, it's just going to automatically assign these keys by default. If you wanted to give it other keys, then you can do the same thing we did up here, but in here. So in this case, we can definitely say VK left, VK right, VK up, VK down. And then you can leave the last one empty if you like, and then it is just going to default to VK escape, which is pretty good. It's fairly handy. And you know, from there, we can just simply use these keys by referencing the array. So if I say inputs array, and then we can just pass in whatever key, right, that we want to access, like this. But we're gonna actually do this in a much better and proficient way. So let's get rid of this and let's just keep going. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're gonna have, you know, our inputs, right? We're gonna have right and SQL, and then we're gonna say function, like so, curly braces, and then you're gonna say return, and in this case we're gonna say inputs array, that's 0, and that's it. And we're gonna do basically the same thing for all the other ones. So what this essentially does is these variables now are a function that you can call. So now we can definitely do my default profile, right? And then we can say that right, like this, and it'll automatically give you access to the input that is inside of the array. Now, the way we want to do this, though, is not by doing that. The way we want to do this is by actually saying, you know, keyboard check, and then we're going to have that inside of that function. Keyboard check returns true or false depending on whether you're holding a key or not. So if you're holding it, it's going to return true, and when you let go, it's going to return false. And this is very useful because the argument that it takes is simply a key code. So that's the reason why we're doing OR, and then we have the letter, right, or the key in quotation marks. So in this case, it's just going to say, hey, return, you know, whether this is true or false, which is great because now we have created and defined this function, each one of these functions, as one variable that we can call later on. So we just have to do this one time, and we can go ahead and do this, right? We can actually just space this properly. That way we can definitely have things fairly well aligned. Hold Alt, then you drag down, you're going to be able to edit multiple lines at a time. And since we already copied that keyword check text, right, in this case that function, you can just copy that and paste it like so, and you don't have to do that multiple times. So the same thing we can do here, hold Alt, click and drag down, and then just press, you know, complete the other part of the parentheses, and we're pretty much done. We can definitely go ahead and do a little bit of cleaning here, but it's really up to you. You don't have to do any of this, or you can do it far better than me from the beginning. So far so good. So now we already have the struct and how it works. Now we have to see if what we have done can be used. So we're gonna get rid of this right here, and I'm gonna show you how we're gonna be able to use this with the object, the player object. So we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna go into the create event, and then here we're gonna define a struct. So you can do this with a struct as well, but just to make this a lot faster, get inputs, and we're gonna say equals to another struct. So this is where things get really interesting. So we can declare a struct in a much different way than the way we did before. So in this case, we want to get the inputs, right? But we also want to store the different profiles of inputs that we're going to allow the user get access to. In this case, we go ahead and we're going to create an array of profiles, right? And we're going to say profiles array, column, because this is a regular struct. So in this case, we're going to go ahead and say new, create profile, right? Just like that. And then here we're going to leave it empty. So right here, we're going to put the different inputs, that we would like our user to be able to use, just like that. And we already have our profiles array, right? Which has been populated with different structs. Okay, so that's good and dandy. The next thing that we're going to have to do is we're going to write a function that allows us to use each one of the profiles, right? So in this case, we're going to go ahead and put a comma right here, because you have to remember, when you create your struct this way, everything that you put in it has to be separated by a comma. In this case, we already have an array of profiles, and then we're going to create different variables and other things that we're going to use later on. So in this case, we can say current profile, and we can say 0, add a comma, and then we can definitely create a function that is going to let us know which profile we are going to be using. And the way we're going to accomplish that is by simply creating a function. So we're going to call this function inputs, just like this. Let's say function. And then we're going to go ahead and return a value from this function. In this case, we're going to say profiles array, and this is going to have the place inside of the array that we want to get the information from. In this case, it's going to be current profile. And then after that, that's the end of the function. So with that done, we should be able to put everything that we've done so far into practice. Right click here and go to object and create an end step event to test everything out. So in this case, we're going to say x plus equals to x speed and y plus equals to y speed. So right now, all we have to do is say, all right, we have to get the input from our player object. And the way we do that is by simply assigning the functions that we created using the struct's profile. All right, so right here, we're gonna make sure that we set up, our target goal for the horizontal movement and our target Y for the vertical movement. So we're gonna say target X is equal to, something. And then here we're just gonna go ahead and copy the same thing, because it's just gonna be target Y, like so. And we're gonna say, now target X is gonna determine, whether the value is positive or negative. And that way we can use that to tell the character, hey, move left or right, based on what we're pressing. So in this case, we can literally say max speed, right, times GetInputs, and then we access the struct's values by using the that notation. That inputs, and you gotta remember, this is a function, so we have to put the parentheses right here, and then we can call the next function is gonna be right? So we can say right minus, and then here we're gonna use the same thing again. So we can definitely just go ahead and copy this and paste it here, like so. And we're gonna say left, and that's pretty much it for the most part. So for the vertical movement, we can definitely do the same thing. We can literally just copy all the values that we have up here, and then we're gonna change a couple of things that are different. So in this case, we're gonna say the same thing, max speed times the inputs that we want to use, but in this case, it's definitely going to be down, and in here is gonna be up, because we wanna move up when we subtract. So this is basically going to return either true or false. And then if you say, let's say that this is true, and this is not true, in this case false, if you do 1 minus 0 is basically going to give you 1. And if you multiply that by the max speed, that's what you're going to get. So you're just going to get the max speed as a positive number. But if the opposite happens, then you're going to have negative max speed, and you're going to move to the left. Same thing for up and down. So the next step that we have to follow is to apply our target x and target y to our x speed and y speed. In this case, we can definitely say x speed is equal to lerp, right? And we're gonna say x speed like that, and then we're gonna say target x. Let's make sure you spell it correctly, target x. And here we're just gonna say, let's say acceleration. Let's just call it that for now. And this is for the x. So we're gonna create the variable here, and we're gonna say acceleration is equal to, and this has to be a value from 0 to 1. So it's gonna be just a fraction. So it's gonna be like 0.2, something like that. And we're gonna basically do the same thing for the vertical movement. In this case, it's gonna be y speed. And we're gonna say y. So, and before we actually run the game, we're just gonna have to change this to y. Okay, so we just made a very small mistake. We forgot to put this in parentheses, because this is the way it's supposed to be, like so. So just make sure that is in parentheses, like so. And this should work just fine. So hit F5 once again and run the game. Let's see what happens. Yeah, we're able to move just fine. It was just a problem with the order of operations in this case. And as you can see, we're moving left and right, up and down without a problem. So that means that, you know, everything that we've done so far has paid off. So now we need to implement a system that is going to allow the user, in this case the player, to switch between profiles so they can play with whatever they like. So let's go ahead and do that. Now that we're back in our create event, we're gonna just just input a comma right here inside of the struct, and then we're going to create the function that is going to allow us to assign a different value, in this case a different profile, to our array. So we're gonna say ChangeProfile. We're gonna say function. We're just gonna have this change the value by using the middle mouse button. So in this case, we're going to say current profile, right, plus equals. So there's a function called mouse wheel up and mouse wheel down, and this basically returns either true or false if the mouse wheel is going down or up. In this case, we want mouse wheel down first, right? So we can say mouse wheel down, like so, and then we can say minus mouse wheel up. In this case, we can say up, and that's it, parentheses. So this function is going to basically assign either 1 or -1 to our current profile variable. So if it is a 2 and you go up, it's going to subtract 1, making it 1. Now, before we go any further, we have to make sure that we don't create any bugs by just allowing the user to go beyond the length of the array. Let me explain. So your array has a length, right? So this is the amount of entries that it has. In this case, it has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 entries. However, arrays start at 0. So if we count from 0, it's going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, and 4. If for some reason you input a 5, this is going to make your game crash. If you input anything below 0, it's going to make the game crash as well. So we have to, in some way, tell the game, hey, listen, if we actually go above the value, right? If we go above the maximum amount of entries for the array, we want this value to actually go back to 0. And we want the opposite to happen as well. So we want it to go from 0, right? If it goes below 0, to actually go to the maximum value. So what we're going to do is we're going to say if current profile, right, which is our counter that we're keeping track of, goes above, and here we're going to I think we should create a function for this. I think I can just simply say var get profile, get array, get profiles array length, and we're gonna say array length. This is a built-in function that gives you the length of an array, and then we pass in the profiles array. And then we say -1, right? Just like that. So this is going to give us the length of the array every single time. So we can definitely say that if the current profile is more than the GetProfile's array length, right? We just have to make sure that we set it to 0. We can say current profile equal to 0. And then here we do the opposite. Else, if current profile is less than 0, then we're going to simply say current profile is equal to GetProfile's array length, just like that. And this should prevent any errors from happening. Okay, so with that function done, we can definitely just go ahead and try it out. Go into the step event, and let's go ahead and call that function. There's a function, and we should be able to see the results. So let's actually run the game once again. F5 to save and run the game. Now that things are up and running and have the program running, I'm going to try to use the WSD keys. And as you can see, they no longer work. So now I'm going to try to use the arrow keys. And as you can see, they work just fine. Great. That's awesome. That's exactly what we wanted. Now I'm going to switch the thing once again, the profile, by going down, and these no longer work. But the arrow keys, I'm sorry, but the WSD keys don't work either. Some of them do, but that's because we have the profile of ESDF. So you can see E is up and D is down, just like that, beautifully. So now we have to create another function that displays what profile we're actually on. So let's go right ahead and do that. With that out of the way, we're going to go ahead and create the function that is going to display the keys. So in this case, let's say that we're going to say we need a way to know which profile we're actually displaying. So let's say profile names, and we're going to make that an array. So let's not forget to actually put a comma at the end of it. So now we have that. And the good thing about having this and having the current profile variable in is that we can use that for displaying this. So now we're going to go ahead and we're going to display the profile. So we're going to say, so right now we can just go ahead and run this function. But before we do that, we're going to right click and we're going to go into the object. Right click again and add an event. In this case, we're going to add a DrawGUI event, just like this. And this is where we're going to be calling this function. And it should work just fine. So let's go ahead and run the game and see what happens. And as you can see here, it says current profile, default. If we go up and down, we just keep on getting them just fine. And to make things even better, we can definitely just exit this and go into fonts. I know this is getting a little lengthy, but just bear with me. Create a new font and say UI font, like so. So that we got something very neat. Let's make it 20 pixels. And that's it. We can now go back to where we were in the create event and say draw set font, UI font, like so. And now, if we run the game again, things are going to look even neater. So as you can see right there, we have the current profile, switch. We got the arrow keys are no longer working. I'm sorry, the default keys are no longer working. Now we have the arrow keys, just like that. And in this case, if you want to see me actually pressing, go like this, down, right, up, and then change again. And this is the next profile, right? And as you can see, I'm moving with the next profile just fine. If you go down one more time, then we get a different profile. And that way, you have set up a profile system for people who don't like to play with the average, arrow keys or some other setups. And this one allows you to play with the numpad, just like that. Beautiful, isn't it? Yeah, there you have it, just like that, you know. And the good thing about this system is that everything just wraps. That means that you're not going to go beyond the limit of the size of the array or below it. So this prevents bugs from happening. And yeah, I think, you know, this is a fairly neat thing that I think a lot of people who do game jams would benefit from a lot, given that sometimes you don't have that much time to add stuff like this. And this is something that I think that is a quality of life feature that sometimes even games that are very polished lack. Keeping people inside of one controller layout is actually not a lot of fun, especially if you have a wide range of people playing your game on keyboard. And they, you know, in my case, I like to play with, you know, WASD. But if people say, hey, yeah, let's just make the game so they have to play with the arrow keys, because a lot of people are used to playing with the arrow keys. I don't like that. You know, this is what I like. So if we don't have anything of that sort, then things get a little hectic, and a lot of people don't want to try your game because it doesn't have that. Some people will try it, you know, because they don't want to download something that they can not even get to try, because that sucks. But yeah, I hope you learned something useful. And, you know, if you like this tutorial, please let me know so I can actually work on this so that I can work on making like more high quality tutorials. And yeah, before you go, don't forget to like, favorite, and subscribe for more content. Support me on Patreon if you can. Also, follow me on Twitter for more, you know, game dev tips and whatnot. But yeah, until next time, thanks a lot for watching, and have a wonderful rest of the day. Goodbye.